Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. My guest today is Jasper Steinhausen, and he and I talk about making sustainability profitable, which, as it happens, is the title of Jasper's book, which is coming out on Monday, the 5th of June. So I encourage you to go ahead and buy a copy of that when the book comes out. We talk about the topic of sustainability from the perspective of, is it a profitable thing to do? How can we make it profitable? What mindset do we need to have to achieve that? And what's the process and the structure that Jasper recommends us to follow to achieve that outcome? What was really interesting, though, is a lot of the stuff that Jasper was saying draws very direct parallels, in my opinion, to safety. So how can we make safety profitable is exactly the same as how can we make sustainability profitable in many respects. So I'm sure you'll get a lot from this conversation. Do give it a listen or a watch if you're joining us on YouTube. Let us know your feedback. Connect with Jasper on LinkedIn and follow him. And do go ahead and buy his book on Monday, the 5th of June. Hope you enjoy the conversation about making sustainability profitable. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
I'm delighted to be joined today by my guest, Jasper. I'll tell you what, I'm going to stop sharing. I've known Jasper for a couple of years, and I've seen the progress he's been making with getting his message out there about making sustainability profitable. And I really was keen to get him onto the Safety Roundtable because I felt as if, particularly with safety professionals increasingly getting more added onto their plate, sustainability and environment are often included in part of that. So I thought it'd be a really valuable session for everybody. So looking forward to hearing what Jasper's got to say in my chat to him. Do you want to give a quick intro to yourself, Jasper, and tell everybody about the little offer that you're putting out there as well?
Yeah, sure. And Christian, so thank you so much for having me here. It's I've been looking forward to this. I could see you have a lot of engaged followers on social media. So yeah, I could see there was already lining up a long list of interesting questions. So I've been looking forward to this day and this little session here. So my name is Jasper Steinhausen. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Business with Impact. I'm a leadership consultant, and my specialty is to make sustainability profitable. I've been in this space for a very long time by now. I'm the longest running consultant on circular economy in the Nordics, and have worked with 100+ companies on this and been giving presentations to business leaders on how do you actually connect sustainability in business to well beyond 10,000 people over the last decade or so. So I've been around, and I look really forward to all your questions. And then, because I could see that so many of you were actually already starting to ask questions in advance, and the quality of the questions, I felt like this could be really interesting. So I wanted to put something out there to sort of, hopefully sort of engage you even further. So I put a bit of a prize on top of here. So we'll make a draw. I'll actually have Christian make the draw somewhere in the end amongst everybody who asks a question. And you can get a 1 hour mentoring session with me, a coaching session, a one-to-one with me. So if you feel like you have a good question or something you just want to have answered somewhere along this, just put it in there. And then at the end, Christian will make a draw between everybody of you who have sent in some sort of question. And one of you will get an hour for free of coaching with me, which is a face value of 1,250 euros. So that's a little something to sort of hopefully encourage you even more to ask questions.
Perfect. And what we'll do, I think, for that, we'll give some people who watch the replay or listen to this on the podcast an opportunity. So what I'll do is I'll gather in the questions, and then I'll gather any questions that we get for anybody listening to this or watching the replay. We'll we'll include those people as well, just to be because we are repurposing this content left, right, and center.
And
we
that's
want
perfectly fine.
We want people to be able to get an opportunity to chat with you and get an opportunity to do that one-to-one as well. So it's great to have you here. And I'm going to start by asking you, Jasper, some questions on this topic, and then everyone else pile in with questions in the chat, and I'll monitor that. And there'll be a formal kind of Q&A session at the end where people can unmute on Zoom and get involved as well. So this morning, if you noticed on LinkedIn, I came across an article on The Guardian, and it was talking about a group of students who are saying that they're going to boycott certain insurance companies because of their support for fossil fuels. And that just, I thought, was happenstance that article came out today, and we were talking about it this afternoon. But I guess that's an illustration of thinking about this from a helicopter view. This is this concept of sustainability. I know you agree with this, but it's really important, right?
It is, yes, and I think it's a good example of how more and more people are picking up on it and starting to feel, a really urgent need for us to take action at a completely different level than what we do today. And for some, it turns out in that sort of, I guess, people are confused and they feel like, it's terrifying to watch the state of the world and then the lack of response or the level of the response. And that's why they, come to a conclusion that, okay, it's time to start boycotting stuff, or, becoming more, I wouldn't say extreme, but sort of up the ante a bit about what are the kind of response they're calling for. And you see that at very often we talk about it as mainly the younger people doing that. And of course, it is more of those you see on the streets also marching for it, but it's actually at all levels in society. But we just have different means of showing that discontent with the level of action that we are seeing.
Yeah, and I came up with an interesting line today, and in this post, and I said it's I compared the 1980s when it was all about greed and getting rich and so on to now, and I said that it's about values, not value. So you can steal that line if you like.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. It is. And it is a radical shift for some. But for a lot of companies, it's actually not that far along from where they are. It just needs a different perspective, and they need to connect it more to business. I think that's mainly the missing link for most business leaders, is to figure out, how do I connect the business and sustainability to make it more than just branding?
Yeah, and it's interesting to contrast and parallel that to safety, isn't it? Because I think if you were to, have a breakfast meeting of the FTSE 100 CEOs and you ask them, is sustainability important and is safety important, they would all say yes. But I suppose the question is, how can we embed those things within our business to make, as you say, to draw the line between sustainability in this case and business success, and how do we do that? So I suppose the obvious question is, can sustainability be profitable for a business?
Yeah, and it's a really loud yes that will be shouting out here. I should be shouting, actually, to sort of make sure people get it right. Not too long ago, I had my researcher look into, because I've seen this several times with companies I've worked with, but I wanted to check that it wasn't just sort of me, or that I have had sort of a lucky punch with the companies that were ready to do something enough to get somebody like me on board for a while. So I had my researcher sit down and look for articles, studies, reviews, other things that sort of looked at studies, right? So just to see where were we at. So we ended up with a list of more than 30,000 companies, small and middle-sized companies, all from Europe, that all have different versions of it, but the general trade was a really, really clear business value driven by sustainability. For some, it was cost reduction. Some, it was increasing sales. Some, it's customer loyalty. Some it was a matter of, there was one I remember that was direct made from there was a finance institute. I think it was a Belgian bank or something that has done the research. So they say, well, these are more investable and they had higher credit ratings and more innovation. And, so it's really classic business challenges. This is what's on the plate of any C-suite people today, one or more of these. What they just don't recognize is that there's actually an extra layer in the toolbox called sustainability that they can add to their leadership skills already that will give them different ways and different approaches to reach the goals that they would like to reach anyway. And then on top of that, actually also contribute to making the world a better place.
Yeah, and if you're ticking both of those boxes, then you're doing a great job, aren't you? So that's to be.
Yeah, you got to do both, right? Yeah. As I say, it's about making business with embedded environmental impact, and not the other way around, right? So we gotta make sure that we tick both boxes at the same time. It has to have an impact both on the business and on the world.
Yeah, and how, that's obviously a journey. It's not something that you kind of click your fingers and it's done. So
unfortunately not.
No. And I guess the answer is going to depend on all sorts of factors. But let's say we had a business with 200 staff and it's in the manufacturing space or something like that, and they decide, okay, yeah, we want to go on this journey. I mean, how sort of long would it take to be in a position where you can feel as if you're achieving success, and then you're able to kind of quantify and measure the outcome of that success in some way?
Well, not too long, actually. I think less time than most people would expect. But the thing is, it all depends on how you approach all of this. So I just actually in June 5 here, so just 10 days or whatever it is from now, I'll be having this book will be coming out that actually has sort of the recipe for how do you actually do this, right? It's called Making Sustainability Profitable. And in there, I have what I call the impact blueprint, which is the 5 steps to answer your question. That's the 5 steps you need to cover to really make sustainability profitable for you. And the first one is all about the mindset and the understanding of this. This is the whole approach, right? And I guess that's also something that's really a cornerstone in safety, because what you see is all there is. So what you direct your attention to and how you view the world completely determines what you see and how you react to it. So that's sort of framing and modeling of the mindset, and we can dive into it later if you like. I saw there were questions on that in your post yesterday, at least. Several of them actually, but so that's the first step. Then the second one is setting that sort of Northern Star. Where do we want to go? And so that, how is it that we want to contribute? Because one thing is to say, well, we want to do something, but what is it actually? And most businesses have, some sort of formal or informal, written, unwritten mission, purpose, vision, something, whatever they call it, especially if it's a 200 people size company, they will probably have something. But most of them will also have something that fairly much is centered on themselves, right? So we want to be best at, or we want to bring the best product to, or blah, 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 blah. It's all about me, 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 me. I'm in love with my product. I'm in love with myself and my company. Very typical. Of course, none of the people at this, the quality of people you bring in here today will not have that experience, and that will not be in your business. But some companies, believe it or not, actually have that self-centered focus about their own product. So it's all about getting out of your head, actually, and say, well, how do I? It's having a really good question to the answer. How do I make the world a better place, right? Why is the world a better place? Because we exist. That's really when you got to have a compelling, a clear answer to that. So that's really the second one, because that will be your guideline, but also your signpost to the world. Hey, I'm onto something here bigger than myself. And everybody who's aligns with that, so say it's climate change, that will be the area that you focus on. But then all this, and this very largely growing proportion of the people that find we need to do something, they will automatically be drawn towards you, because whatever service you provide, let's just say they make office furniture, to say something. Well, if you are looking for office furniture and one of the companies you come across in your research, they actually also severely try to solve and contribute to solving the climate crisis, well, then you're naturally drawn to it if that's something you feel is important. So that's really your shortcut to getting in that, you know, final list of people. And then, of course, at the end of the day, it's your product and the pricing and all of that determines if you win it or not, but it will get you to the finals on a fast track. And that's very, very valuable as well. So that's the second part. The third part is mapping out. That's really the strategy. What am I going to do? What's the implementation, the action plan that I'm going to do? This is where I use circular economy to map out, and you get a long list of opportunities that you could pursue. And then the kicker here, and this is where most people get it wrong, is then you connect it towards what's the top 3, top 5 problems that's currently on your plate and on your customer's plate. And then you filter through that lens. Whereas most people, they kind of look at, well, which is the biggest impact I have? And then you start there.
So you're linking the sustainability agenda to a pressing customer problem or a pressing business problem, and therefore you're kind of making it more likely that you're going to do it, if that makes sense. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. And making sure that every step you take is going to be high value for you, because you know you're dealing with the stuff that you're already dealing with. It also means you will never end in this discussion, or it will at least be a lot simpler. You know, how do I find resources to do it? Because they're probably already allocated, because this is your top problems. It's what's already on your mind, right? So you don't have to find additional time, additional money. It's just a new route to solve the thing that's already on your mind. So those are the first 3 steps. I call those the learning steps, because this is really about setting you up for it. And then the 2 last ones are, this is where it gets funny. So this is the earning steps, right? So the fourth of these steps are movement, I call it. So that's really about implementation. And as you just depicted very rightly, since you're only working on stuff that's high value, it's going to be a lot easier compared to a lot of companies. We find they struggle with implementing it because it's not really that interesting for them to get it up and running. But this will all be really, really interesting, and your customers will love you for it. The board will love you for it. Everybody will. So it's a lot easier. So it's getting that. And then the 5th and final step, I call that magnify. That's getting it out to the world. And the reason why it's not just communicate, but magnify is because there are two parts to this. It's about inspiring others, and of course about getting it out there that you're doing all of this, because you can do all the right things in the world, and if nobody knows, you will never get any credit for it. So you have to go out and tell. And I know there are also several questions on communication, so I think we could dive into that later if you like. How do you do this? What does it take? And all of that, greenwashing, all of those things. But basically, you know, if you go through those 5 steps, if you get those assets in place, have your mission, have your roadmap, have your implementation plan, start to do something, create the results, and go out and communicate it, then basically you're set to go. And you can do that in you know, I run a program on this, so that's over 5 months, but you can do it faster if you like, and you can take slightly longer time, but it's in that realm, I would say.
Okay, so yeah, you said something that you can have a pretty, you know, in the grand scheme of business, you know, doing something in a few months is pretty quick, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned something there about, you know, you gave the example of climate change. So is this something that you and I know both love the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and, you know, we're thinking about picking one of those that you really resonate with. Is this something that you can do, let's say, on climate change? If you're really passionate about that, focus on that. Don't worry about other aspects of sustainability. Just really go hard in on one. Or do you need to have that kind of holistic view? Have you got any opinions on that?
Yeah, I absolutely have. It's a very good question. And the thing is, I'm missing only one thing in the graphical illustration of the 17 goals. That is that there should be a small frame around them, because it should signal that these are interdependent. So if you just choose one thing, I mean, I'm not suggesting you should do something on all of it, but what I am suggesting is that you should be really aware about the interdependence. So it might be that within your business, you need to focus on 1, 2, or 3 things, because they are actually, and you might, if you just focus on one thing, say climate, then there might be something else out there that is actually, hindering you to get the results, or the other way around. Actually, it could be that it's a bigger negative impact than the positive that you're able to create, right? So let's just say that companies are focusing on, could be humans' rights, or it could be on let's say water or something, access to water, but they neglect anything about climate. And well, the changing climate means that the water scarcity problem is just going to be bigger. So it might be that you found a new kind of solution that will help it better, and you will contribute a bit on the water side. But since you neglect everything else, well, then that's just going to make the problem so much bigger. So your impact is just going to be disappearing. So there is this need for a holistic approach. I think that's a key word in sustainability, is really understanding that these things interact. I think that's a really crucial point. But then, of course, you got to find out what works best for me. Who am I? Again, back to this mission. What is it that I really care about as a business owner, or we do as the leadership team, or the board, or whoever you want to take in on depending on your size and company setup, who defines what it is that's going to be the mission. But making sure that it aligns to that, and then to what it is your business do, your strength, and the setup, the connections you have, the place you are in the ecosystem around you. That's all part of helping you figure out, how can I make the biggest impact and the most meaningful, I guess you could say, leverage of the time and energy you invest in it.
Yeah. And I suppose also you don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good to some extent either, because if you have a real passion for a particular aspect of sustainability, and that aligns to a customer problem, and that aligns to your business success, well, actually going all in on that area is maybe not the ideal thing to do, but it's better than doing nothing, I suppose. And I mean, a lot of the messaging around this topic is certainly around climate change is, if everyone just takes small steps and does small things, that will help the overall problem. So I suppose we want to encourage people to do something rather than nothing, and don't aim for perfect, but get going.
Yeah, and two things on that. One thing is that I think it was the latest presentation at for the latest report from the IPCC on climate change, where I think it was the chairman of the commission, or whoever it was, who said, it's everything everywhere all at once, because we're so late in the game by now. So it doesn't really matter. It's just do something. That's the key thing. But then, from my experience, I would say it's really about back to this connecting it to your business, because that's what makes you drive through all the things you want to do and actually deliver on it and make it more valuable. So you got to make sure. So let's just say you did a carbon footprint of your company, which a lot of people do. A lot of companies do, and you have a list of 10 areas, just to say something, with an impact. But if it's the 5th, 6th, and 7th that are aligning completely well with your top problems, well, then start there.
Yeah.
Because then you will actually implement them, rather than say, I'm going to start from the top, and then I'm going to assign, this big of a budget and this many resources to get it done, and we'll probably die halfway through it. And never ever achieve anything. So you got to make sure you pick the right ones, because then after you've done those, then perhaps some of the others all of a sudden gain a business value for you, either because people are starting to expect something from you, or you're in a different position, you learn something else, you're starting to see new opportunity sides in this agenda, and so on and so on. So steadily you will get around, you will get to cover all of them over time. It's just the order. But don't just start from the top. Start from what makes business sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Obviously, the audience for my roundtables and podcast and LinkedIn and so on is primarily made up of safety professionals, as opposed to CEOs and so on.
Yeah.
Any particular thoughts around that context that might be especially relevant to these people, where, as I said earlier, they often have environment sort of bolted on to their role. It might be a passion of theirs, but it's kind of added into the pot as such. Any thoughts on how they should approach this in particular?
I think the key thing is, and this is actually back to the mindset part, it's getting the foundational stuff right and help spreading that. Because if you do that, you know, whether you have sort of the environmental manager-ish role, if that's your name, CSR, environment, sustainability, something manager, and sometimes that has safety with it as well, or you're on the safety side and have sustainability somehow attached to you, bolted on, as you said. Very often, you know, you might be in the organizational hierarchy. If you look at it on a page, well, you're completely aligned with the production manager, the, you know, everything else. It looks like, well, equal in weight, but in most organizations, that's not the case. It's actually way lower down. You don't have the same impact. You don't have the same power and over decisions and setting the course. But the thing is that a lot of the CEOs and C-level people, they are understanding that we need to do something, but they haven't got a clue how to lead this and how to do it. So for them, it's just one big foggy terrain they're looking out across, and they haven't got a clue how to steer and set the direction. And one of the reasons why they don't have it is also because they have the fundamentals wrong. So if you get it right and help them see it right and connect it to the business value, that will increase your opportunity and your influence in the organization radically. I've seen this several times, not with safety people, but as I said, with the environmental people that often are in the same position. And sometimes it is actually, as I said, precisely the same position. So, you know, it's just really understanding the business side of this and not approaching it as a environmental problem, but as a way to develop and understand and create new solutions that are a better and more elegant solution to the problems we're facing. So that'll be one of them. Another one is the way we talk about it. So very often sustainability is something about reduce, right? And I'm guessing that a lot of it could be the same in the safety space. But here on the environmental side, at least, it's very much about a reduce, avoid, right? Less of. So, and target could be, let's reduce 70%, or ultimately for most companies, it's kind of like, well, zero is the ultimate goal, right? Zero carbon emissions or zero waste or zero whatever it is. But there's really, you know, just feel it, right? There's no energy in zero, right? From a business point of view, who gets up in the morning as a businessman? It's kind of like, if we could just reach zero, it will be freaking amazing. I love it. You know, that's it. That's the goal for today or for this year. It's just to reach zero. No, nobody does that, right? Nobody. So if you have a conversation, or if you imagine you're a CEO sitting down looking at this area that you are now sort of have got on your plate as well on sustainability, their experience is, well, I get up in the morning to deliver growth. And everybody I ever met who talked about sustainability, they got up in the morning to minimize something. So obviously, we are not on the same page. I want more, they want less. That's all about it, right? So you have to shift that around. And part of that is just how you frame and communicate it. And the other part is, you know, how high do you actually aim? But if you shift it from a reduce, avoid, to a create, right? We want to create better solutions, even though that means it could be less energy intensive. It could be exactly the same exercise, basically, you're wanting. But if you're framing it as we want to create something, well, then you align the whole notion and vocabulary with the business people, because they want to create something, and actually with all of mankind, because, you know, ever since we got up from crawling on all four, we've been driven forward by a passion and a drive to create something, to make tomorrow better than yesterday.
Bigger and better, yeah.
Right? So that's it. It's deeply ingrained in us. If we should, sometimes it's kindly misused frame about ingrained in our DNA. Well, this is probably as close as we get to something being ingrained in our DNA. It is actually a drive to make tomorrow better, right? So when you communicate that this is agenda about creating new and better solutions, it's so much easier to gather people to get around it. And it will be so much easier for you to get the C-levels people's attention if you talk about creating newer, better solutions and connecting it to new ways of solving the core problems for our clients and so on. Then all of a sudden it's kind of like, hold on. Apparently this guy is starting to talk about something that resonates with what I do, but he comes with from a different background. Perhaps he has a different perspective. I think I should start to listen to this fellow, probably for the first time ever, to really listen in, because now it seems like there must be something relevant here to pick up, something where I know I need to do something, but I haven't got a clue. And all of a sudden he's starting to talk business language. So just having that sort of small change, but actually pretty radical in impact from, this is not about avoiding and reducing and sorry we're here. This is about, chest up, forward, saying we dare to go this way. We'll be creating something better. We'll make a positive impact on the world. We will make a difference. We will solve problems. We'll drive forward. That shift in energy is so needed in this sector. And if you could be the driver of that internally in your company, I'll bet you will experience a radical shift in how much people listen and how many listen and who and what they're ready to do with what you tell them.
Now, I don't know about anyone else, but I'm going to go back and listen to that last 5 minutes 2 or 3 times, and I'm going to start getting my notepad out and making notes, because to me that was great insight there. So thank you for that. You took it a step further, because I was about to say, as you answered that question in 2 parts. The second part was very inspiring, and the first part I was about to interrupt you and say, not interrupt, but interject and say, it's interesting because what you're saying is exactly what I recommend people to do from a safety perspective, which is you've got to get to know what are the pains, what are the goals of everyone else in your organization, and you've got to be an enabler, and you've got to figure out a way of embedding safety into being a delivery mechanism for them achieving their goals, and that's how you can get them on board. So we were on the same page, on the same page there. So yeah, definitely, guys, have a good listen back to that and take some notes, and I think really digest that and take it on board, because to me that is something that in the safety world we everybody listening to this or watching this has got the skill set, but it's these soft skills and this ability to influence that I think can make a big difference. So going from something very positive to something a bit more potentially negative on this topic, which is greenwashing. So how do we sort of, firstly, what do you think about that, and then secondly, how do we kind of avoid being put into that box of being seen as greenwashing if we start to focus on sustainability?
Yeah, this is really an interesting topic and a bit of a minefield. And I think perhaps one of the things that I experience most people that makes most people reluctant to do anything about this, and especially to communicate on it, is that fear of being it. But it's actually it's simpler to get right than you might expect. I think that's the good news. So the first thing that's essential is that, of course, you have to have some results to demonstrate, but the key thing is to be specific and talk about the results, right? So there is no room for, and in many countries and soon in the whole European Union as well, it will be downright illegal. So you'll be fined for it if somebody take you to court. They will win. But for going out with broad statements like, we have a greener product, or we're a sustainable company, or, something along those lines. So that's the surest route to being accused for greenwashing. It's keeping at that broad level and just sort of blurbing it out. We are brilliant, right? So you have to be specific on your results. What is it actually that we've been doing? And then I find I have what I call I have this model in the book where you basically take 3 of the components from the model. So you have the specific results is what should always be the bigger part of your communication, but then tie it in with that mission, right? Where am I actually going? Because that's the context, that's the bigger frame for everything you do. And then just signaling as well, somehow smaller or bigger proportion of your communication, but that there is, you have a plan, you have a roadmap. So what you're talking about here is not a one-off, because I remember just recently I saw somebody had sort of divided greenwashing in 7 different categories of greenwashing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. So somebody has spent time doing that, but at least some of them made quite a lot of sense. And one of them they called green lighting. And that's this notion of you have one sort of lighthouse project, and that's basically what you do, right? So you have business as usual, and there's one area where you try to do really good, and it probably is really good, but that's all of it. That's all there is, right? And people, they start to see through it, and they become increasingly good at recognizing all of this. So if you just have, one area you do really good, and even though you talk about the specifics and do everything right there, they'll still be looking at you and say, yeah, but what about the rest, guys, right? You still have crappy products, even though it's now driven by renewable energy, your whole factory, but the rest is still completely off. So it doesn't really matter, right? And that's back to another component of the mindset, is really understanding that it's not a project. It's not something you do somewhere. People very often also shy away from, it's too risky to mess with the core. So what we do is we might do a bit on packaging, or we have electrical vehicles for our fleet, or for the managers, or stuff like that, and then business as usual for the rest. But you got to recognize that this is a new way of doing, right? So it's about changing the core of what you do. It's the high risk is not in working with the core. The high risk is actually if you don't work with the core, because people will just see through what you do, and then you will end up on the wrong side of history anyway in people's perception, and you will be accused of greenwashing. So understanding and taking to heart that it's actually not risky to start messing with the core of your business. The risk side is if you don't.
Yeah, I love that. And Matthew in the chat has given an example of Lego here, trying to get away from the fact its base product is petroleum derived, but they're zero carbon manufacturing. Maybe an example.
Yeah, and well, actually, Lego is interesting because I think perhaps a handful year ago or something, they threw a significant amount of money. I think it was around 5 billion Danish kroner, which is probably £500 million, give or take, into a project of finding a plant-based alternative to make their Lego blocks from, and actually succeeded. I know they had some trouble with it. They were not completely satisfied with it, so it's never went into mass production, but they are working on several different areas to find solutions to it. So I wouldn't say that they are not, they're doing a lot, but they haven't succeeded, but that's how innovation is on everything. So I wouldn't normally put them completely in that category of companies that just have that one lighthouse thing.
Okay, no, good bit of context. So a couple of last questions from me, and then we'll open it up. So there are questions in the chat, but I'm going to invite people to unmute and have a chat with Jasper if you're on the Zoom call live. I'd be really interested to hear a couple of examples of companies or organizations that have invested in sustainability and they've actually, achieved that quantifiable or qualitative, whichever way, but business value. So a couple of kind of case studies, I suppose, of what, the journeys that people went through and the outcomes that they got.
Yeah. That's a good question, because there is lots of different ones to take from. I think I'll start with one that's a fairly large company, to those of you who are large, or at least because it's a company you probably have known of, or at least are, without knowing it, very familiar with. It's a company called Grundfos. They are the largest producer of pumps in the world. So even if you don't know them, odds are pretty good that if you turn on the tap water and the water comes out, it's probably due to them. So so they produce these small pump units and large ones as well for utility. But anyway, they I've been working with them, had the pleasure of working with them on and off for I think 3 years or so in the early part of their journey. And one of the things that they the guy who was in charge of this, who was sort of operating directly at mandate from the C-level, And he was challenged by one of them, the head of the business unit said, well, show me 1 million Danish kroner, that is, so I don't know, 100,000 or something, pounds in annual recurring savings made on our factory here. And that will make me believe, that's the proof of concept. You have a year, right? And then, okay, so skip lots of the opportunities and just go straight to looking at the waste stream and this approach of seeing waste as a resource. And so they went out and basically did dumpster diving with their colleagues, right? So went out on the shop floor and said, okay, could we just tilt this this dumpster here and start having a talk about what's in here, what's out on the floor now? What is this? What is this? Why is it here? What kind of value does it represent? Who would it be valuable for? And so on and so on and so on. And they were making a lot of noise on all the channels internally about this is where we are moving and circular economy and blah, blah, blah. And then some guy, at one of these, when they're out doing one of these dumpster diving exercises, then one of the guys said, hey, could you come over here? I have something I would like to show you. And it's kind of like, yeah, sure. What is it? And then, it turns out he's the guy, he's at a station in the manufacturing process where he makes those small neodymium parts in the core that actually turns around, that's the ones that makes the pump function. And in his at his shop there, he just has tiny pieces of this highly valuable material that is removed from it to get the optimal shape. And for years, he's been looking at this dust and small craters and just looking at it. It doesn't make sense to throw it out. It's such a valuable, and it's one of these rare earth metals, if you know. It's just like, but where do I go in a business this size, 30,000 people, where it's about how many millions or how many 100,000 pumps are we going to deliver this month? Where do I go and put my hand up and say, I have some dust over here, right? Where do you go with that message? You don't, right? You feel like nobody will ever listen. But now all of a sudden people started asking questions about waste, and he said, well, I have this. And it turns out that he has a big bucket underneath his work desk. And turns out that it's worth 6 million Danish kroner, right? So just to give that idea about material that everybody thinks is just waste, and even just in tiny parts, can be really, really high value, right? And they met their 1 million, actually exceeded it. And the year after they doubled it, and the year after they doubled it again. And then I've lost sort of track with them. So they ended up with having, recurring savings of 5 million or 5 million. So 500,000 pounds recurring savings annually just from this one factory, right? And
nice.
And it's all, you can actually copy paste this solution to all the other factories. And of course they started doing that, right? So it actually sums up. And this was just from one discipline, basically one approach of the circular economy at one company for 1 year, right?
Nice. Yeah, we'd all enjoy 500,000 savings per site we operate in, wouldn't
we? Bits and pieces, as you say.
Great. And I'm going to open it up to questions in a sec. Okay. Before we do that, so hopefully people will volunteer and ask their questions, or I can always run through and ask some of them from the chat. Tell us a bit more about the book. So when's it coming out? How can we get a copy and all that good stuff?
Yeah. Well, thanks. It's coming out here on June 5. That's World Environment Day. So it shows that as the publishing date. So very, very close by. And there's actually, I'll be running an introduction promo. So in the first 48 hours, you can get it for just 99 cents. So very, very cheaply. And if you want to sign up to get an email, just heads up, here it is. This is the link. All you need to do is to go to my website and sign up for it. So you can go into bwimpact.com/books. So that's it. If you go in there, bwimpact.com/books. It's a simple landing page where you can just sign up for it, and then you'll get an email with the link. So that's, I think, the easiest way to get it. But apart from that, you'll be able to find it on Amazon or any sort of major bookstore, both in digital and physical copy, as I said, after June 5 and forward.
Good stuff. And between now and then, obviously, people can connect with you on LinkedIn. They can check out your website. But have you got any other resources that people might be able to go away and use? For example, you've got a scorecard. Do you want to talk a bit about the scorecard? Because that might be a good thing for people to do.
Absolutely, yeah. And we talked a lot about the mindset part here. And I've actually created a scorecard on the mindset. So what it is, you probably take something between 2 to 3 minutes of your time to answer a small range of questions. And that will give you a scoring. And depending on how you score, it's going to give you different small pieces of advice on how to look at these components in your mindset and what were steps and actions you could take. So if that sounds, it's of course completely free. So if you feel like that's interesting for you, you can find that one at greenprofit.scoreapp.com. So greenprofit.scoreapp.com. So that could be another resource. On my LinkedIn page, you can sign up for a free newsletter. So bi-weekly, I post different articles all on these different aspects about how do you connect sustainability and business. So if you find that some of what I've been saying here or some of the cases were interesting and so on, go in there. There's already, 30, 40 articles or something, and keep coming. And I have a podcast. Could be a last thing. So if you found that interesting, then you can just look up at wherever you get your podcast. And it's called Green Business with Impact. So Green Business with Impact, just subscribe to that one. And there will be some podcasting to tune into to learn more if you like.
Good stuff. Lots and lots of free resources, which is always fantastic, and certainly the way that I go about things as well. So for those of you on Zoom, what I'd love you to do, if you've got a question for Jasper, is go into reactions and raise your figurative Zoom hand, and then I'll invite you up to ask a question. In the meantime, I've just got one from John on LinkedIn, which is, how do you get management buy-in when a business only accepts improvements under 3 years ROI? Now, it sounds like some of the stuff you can achieve that ROI more quickly, but how would you kind of go about that sort of challenge, as it were?
Yeah, well, I think it's actually down to that framing of what are we working on, right? So if you come with, again, let's just say this is core business. These are the top 5 problems we have. These are the top 5 problems our clients have that we're trying to solve for them. And then you come with something completely different, right? If that happens, well, then of course there will be say, okay, well, if I should invest in this, I need an ROI on less than 3 years, because otherwise I'll spend my money on something else that's far better, right? So again, it comes down to connecting that the kind of things that you push forward with, that you can see how do they contribute to solving the top problems that's already on their plate. Because if you do that, it will definitely, if let's just say it needs more than 3 years, well, if it solves the biggest problems we have that we currently don't know how to solve, well, it's way better to invest in something that will have a 5-year return on investment than saying no to it and keep struggling with the things that we want to solve. So I find that most often when you have problems with getting approval for initiatives, or problem with having them actually being carried through and implemented, that's because you don't have you're not on the right stuff, right? You're dealing with something that is of less importance to them, right? So you got to look at it from the decision maker's point of view. Those who sponsor this, those who say yes and no, we got to make sure that we solve a meaningful problem in their perspective, because then you're on the need to have. Otherwise, you're on the nice to have. And it sucks to be on the nice to have, to be
sure does,
right?
Yeah.
So we want to get ourselves into the need to have. And when we get that, in this combination of knowing what's on their mind, being able to connect our idea initiative to that, and communicate it with the things that I talked about early on about the mindset part as a business driver, as a positive, as a creating, and so on, it will increase radically your chances of getting through with it. no matter what the return on the investment is. But of course, the shorter, the better.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Stephen, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute and ask Jasper your question?
It's not really to ask a question, Jasper, and or Christian. It's more to kind of support what you've just said. I'm Group Compliance Director at a company, and I've just recently rejoined. When I was first in the business, it was a case of, how can we make the ESG message and sustainability in general more compelling, because sustainability for me is the umbrella that sits above everything, financial sustainability, attracting right talent, keeping the right talent, etc., and everything that your good selves have been talking about. And one of the things that I linked in, obviously it's about knowing what buttons to press with the different people, but our company was very much governed by financial people. So it was like, right, okay, they want to make financial savings. They're also very compliance led. So we got a lot of warehouse facilities, or 4 facilities in total. And the energy costs and what have you were quite ridiculous. And it's like, how do we prove that? How do we get buy-in also from our landlords? Because ultimately when we come out the lease agreements, it's something that they've got a better product to sell if it's more energy efficient and what have you. So we went down that route, and very kind of like on your point, Jasper, is about the return on investment. So, and this is stuff that everybody knows about, it's not rocket science here, but energy efficient lighting, just in time lighting that we installed throughout the warehouses, we had a return on investment in 12 to 18 months. So the people bought into that. And then we also started setting KPIs about how do we reduce down our carbon footprint. And one of the interesting points was from the KPIs that I originally set back in 2019 was that when I came back into the business last year, my CEO said, "Oh, you'll be pleased to know we've now got EV charging points installed at all our warehouse facilities. And by the way, if you've got an electric vehicle, you can charge up for free at our warehouses." And we've just gone down the Octopus salary sacrifice scheme, which we now offer to our colleagues as well. So we're offering an incentive to our colleagues through a more tax efficient service. We're providing them with free electricity to kind of fuel up the car when they come into work, but also obviously from a business point of view, in terms of kind of that kudos with our clients, because we work with some big blue chip organizations that are very much focused on this sort of stuff. That's the angle that we use. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, and we're a long way away, particularly on data reporting and data management and things like that, but our business was very much about what are kind of the quick wins, what can reduce the cost down, and inverted commas, what looks sexy. And that's what I kind of like labored on. So hopefully that supports what you're talking about here today.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. And just to sort of a comment on it, on how to even, and you've been doing a lot of it already, but to everybody, just to underpin that, this unfolding on the opportunity side, because very often you will find that initiatives in this domain, you will be one account you will be investing from, in your example, energy efficiency. So wherever that is, or EV charging point or whatever that is, but it's probably more or less in the same domain, but you will harvest it from several accounts. So you got to take in that your business case has to be slightly more complex than the traditional one, right? Because you will have happier employees. You might have easier to attract the right people. You have something on the branding for clients. You have something on cost reduction, and you might have a couple of other things if I knew a little bit more about it. But it's very typical that one initiative, you sow one area, but you harvest on many different fields. And if you don't also help your executives to understand that when you present the business case, they won't see it. They will probably, they'll miss it. They'll just say, okay, so I need to invest 100,000 in this, and I'm gonna get back 10,000 a year in savings in energy. That's a bad idea. Okay, but if it adds up that it makes it easier to attract and maintain talent, easier to attract and maintain clients, lower your cost, and do something on your branding, and help you to have something to answer when your biggest clients say, what are you doing on climate? Well, then all of a sudden, perhaps it's an extremely good business case, even though on the euro to euro or pound to pound investment on that account, it will take 10 years, but you got to factor in all of it. And that's really, really crucial. Otherwise, you'll end up rejecting great business cases and as well impact on the world.
Yes, that's good advice. Thanks, Jasper. So last question then, because we're coming up to an hour. And this is I know it's gone. Time flies when you're having fun. This is a question from Kevin. just going back to this kind of point about how can we build this in and persuade and influence and so on, what are the top UN Sustainable Development Goals that you think best resonate with businesses when looking to get buy-in, both for what has the greatest impact on sustainability? So, which of them do you think is the best from that perspective, but also which is the most likely to get buy-in from the C-suite?
It's a really good question. And
Kevin's smiling at his good question.
Yeah.
Very good at asking good
questions. As I said before, you got to figure out what works best and resonates best with each company's production setup, opportunity, where you are in the value chain, all of that. So that's part of the answer to it. But if we sort of extract that and just say in general level, I would say that right now there is, as you know, a lot of movement on climate. So climate is very often the name of the game, because we have reached sort of, we are above sort of the early adopters. By now it's mass adaptation, if you look at sort of the bell curve for adaptation of new stuff. So that's, I guess that's the sure bet, right? That's where you can always go to for, and a lot of places that would resonate. Then I find that number 12, responsible production and manufacturing, because it's at the core of what most companies do. And this is where the circular economy sits in. This is the core, at the heart of number 12 is really the circular economy. And the number 12 is also, if you look at, you can find some mappings where people have connected all the underneath the 167 goals, or how many it is that are underneath. If you sort of map how they interact, you will find that the ones that has the biggest number of interactions is number 12, because it has influence on a lot of the others. So it's also a way where you can reach a lot of different things. And the business language in the circular economy, it's just easier to connect for most. So I find that the circular economy, and thereby number 12, has legs to walk on as well. So I think those are probably the two primary on the environmental side of it. And if we go to the more social side, I think a lot of places in Northern Europe, at least, that's where I know the most of it, gender is a big thing. So that equality and gender equality, and actually equality not just in gender, but across ages, across generations, across race, across everything, sexual orientation and all of that. That seems to be, a lot of people are sort of, a lot of companies are, it's exploding between their hands right now because they haven't got that right. So I think that's probably one of the safer bets of something that might call attention for, okay, we need to do something here. I don't know how to. So if you have an idea about that, I think that could open some doors as well. But that would be sort of a generalized guess.
Yeah, I whenever I talk about the goals, and if you're not familiar with this, have a look, and I'll include the link for some information on this in the show notes and so on. But basically, the UN have come up with 17 sustainable development goals. Everybody's agreed on them, and these are the 17 big causes or problems that if we could work together to solve them, it would make the world a better place. I actually talk about the ones that resonate with me are 3, which is good health and well-being, because that kind of fits into my mission around safety. And then 8, and 8 is about decent work and economic growth. And so that one,
I'm with you on that one. Yeah, it's always that's my second as well.
Yeah, that's always going to resonate with businesses, right? And because like you believe sustainability makes good business sense, I believe safety makes really good business sense as well. But yeah, it's definitely worth having a look at those and seeing which ones resonate with you. I'm going to ask you one last quick question, Jasper. It's a very specific one, and I just think it's quite interesting. So this is from Aura, who's joining us, and she said she's got a question about sustainability when we speak about IT, and I know she works in this space. What's your opinion about green IT, and how important is it? Because we all know that every click, shared picture or video generates a carbon impact.
It does indeed. Yeah, that's another really interesting thing, and an area I think where the world is starting to slowly realize that the impact is probably significantly bigger than they realize and that they think. So I will answer it on sort of 2 different angles for 2 different domains of IT. So one will be the hardware side, where there's some really interesting companies working on remanufacturing laptops and servers and all of that. And so we have this general rule where most companies, they buy new IT every 3 years. But in the UK, for instance, you have circular computing, and they remanufacture laptops and put them back out in the marketplace. And what's interesting is that you get, and this is very common for circular solutions, that you get a superior product at the end because it's good as new, has same guarantee. When you get it in your hands, you probably won't be able to tell that it's not remanufactured, apart from the fact that it says circular computing in the on the top of the laptop. But because they know, because the model has been out there for 3 years, what is the weakest point in this? Is there the fan or whatever it is? So they'll have shifted that and upgraded that, so it has a more reliable computer. It's sold at something like 20 to 40% cheaper than brand new, and it has the same warranties and the same software because they are Microsoft partners and everything. So you have everything you get from a new one, just 20 to 40% cheaper, more reliable, and with zero carbon emissions. So, why would you not consider that? I think that's a good question. It same happens on servers and all of that. And then there is the use side, which is far more complex, because we are all getting used to that. It's just storage is basically for free. Right? It has no implications. It's just there. And I think that's also where most of the larger storage companies are moving, is the fact that they realize that they have to take care of this, because getting you and I and everybody here on the call to really consider and find out how do I do, or should I move my server capacity somewhere, or we could of course also all work to try to reduce how much we store, and just not just store everything all the time, but it's really hard to avoid that. So I think that's more something where we got to solve it at the source, meaning that we create centers that are driven by renewable energy 100%. And again, where we have complete and full upgrade and remanufacturing and recycling of components. So I think those are two different kinds of perspectives on IT. I hope they make sense.
That's great. Thank you. I've actually thought of another question I just wanted to ask you, because it's something that I'm interested in, and then we will wrap it up. Yesterday, it was announced that France, the French government, has banned short-haul flights, point-to-point short-haul flights, where I think it's where the journey time by TGV would be less than 2.5 hours, I think, or something like that. So in other words, you can't fly, you can't buy a ticket from, or you won't be able to buy a ticket from Paris to one of the smaller cities. Just wondered if you had any perspectives on that.
That's a bold move, I would say. Fairly interesting to see what comes out of that, and especially in France, I'll be expecting people on the street tomorrow, but at the same time tomorrow. But that's a different story. Well, I think we definitely need to have bold moves, and there are a lot of things in society around us where we have, what we have set up is kind of stupid and it doesn't really make sense. And I know whether or not it's a 2-hour flight or a 2-hour train ride or whatever. I don't know about that, where the border should be, but I think it's points for daring to sometimes put your foot down and say, well, we don't want this product or this solution. So I think that's really critical, because sometimes we do stupid things. So that's one side of it. And then the other side is that it's a great example of how, again, the vast majority of decision makers are still viewing all of this as let's reduce the problem, right? It's the avoidance, it's the reductions. It's not, I mean, for airplanes right now, we don't really have the solution. That's why I say it's probably good, but we could find the same statement on 1,000 other areas that we should avoid or reduce, or somebody suggests we, ban plastic or ban whatever, lots of these. And it's all coming from this, let's reduce and avoid. And they're completely missing the picture and the point that the whole green transition, the reason why it's so interesting and so powerful is that it gives us a great narrative and some great tools to upgrade, basically reinvent everything we have and do, every product, every solution, every component of our society, but to a better version of it. So it's not about reducing and killing and getting rid of, and we should just sit on, or live in a tree, or, that's not about it, but that's where most people are coming from. And thereby they're completely missing this huge potential for recreating something that's just way better, right? When I look at society today, I don't feel like this is the optimum. I'd rather say there's lots of room to improvement. So if we grab this transition and really say we want to upgrade, we want to make something better where more people can have a better life in a just and safe space, right? Because basically the ecosystem is the nest that we all live within, right? So we got to have a safe and just space where more people have access to the kind of products and solutions that they need. And that we could use this opportunity to redo and recreate and make a better version. But most are coming from this. It's about not doing or avoiding. And it's just, we're completely missing out on the opportunity. So I hope that some of you will walk away with this takeaway as it's really not about reducing. It's about creating a better version, because that's what will drive it and make it possible and make, the mass people accept it. Because nobody, just look at France again, what happens when they wanted to, they increase the cost of fuel or whatever it was. Everybody took it to the street because, I can afford it. Right. So when we're doing it this way, it will be unjust and we'll get a lot of problem out of it. Whereas if we go out and create the smarter and better solutions, we can get people to buy into it. And that's what we need. And we need it really, really fast, because there's a lot of changes we need to have happen in the rest of this decade. So I hope that could be one of the key takeaways from you today, is that it's really about creating a better version, one that better suits the need of your customers, and at the same time, make the world a better place.
Great stuff. Well, look, thank you very much, Jasper, for that. Really enjoyed it. Some really inspirational stuff, some great practical tips, and lots of resources for everybody to go away and get hold of and have a play with, and buy the book and read the book and all of this good stuff. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
No, thank you. Perhaps we can always do another session on here as well at another point in time.
So, happy to do that.
Good stuff. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.